Hello everyone. Today our guest is Eyal Weizman'ı. First and foremost, we would like to thank you for accepting our interview request, both on behalf of the program that will be aired on Olan and the version that will later be published in both English and Turkish as a written version in IRM Journal. Before we move on to my questions, I would like to briefly introduce you, Mr. Weizman'ı, and then maybe we will hear more from you. But first, I would like to introduce you a little bit. Eyal Weizman'ı is a professor of spatial and visual cultures at Goldsmiths, University of London, and the founding director of the Center for Research Architecture. In 2010, he founded the Forensic Architecture Research Agency and has been directing it since. And FA, Forensic Architecture, is a research agency based at Goldsmiths, University of London, comprising architects, software developers, filmmakers, investigative journalists, artists, scientists, and lawyers. FA conducts advanced spatial and media investigations into cases of human rights violations on behalf of and with communities affected by political violence, human rights organizations, international prosecutors, environmental justice groups, and the media outlets. So I would like to start by discussing the origins and the objectives of forensic architecture. I would like to begin with a question that will lead us into these topics. The word forensic suggests a connection to law and legality, and you first introduced the concept of forensic architecture in your book, The Least of All Possible Evils. In the book, you mentioned that the concept emerged from crime. Could you talk about the meaning of the word, its relationship with the concept of human rights, and how it led to the founding of forensic architecture, please?
First of all, just to say what a pleasure it is to be here and to speak to you, Sinem, and to our listeners and viewers. This is really, you bring me to the heart of things. For groups that are interested in justice and liberation, we have a very ambiguous relation to the law, because we know that legal frameworks, which might be useful in some contexts, could actually be rather destructive in others. In fact, a lot of systems of occupation and control are operated with the law. You know, I started my journey as an Israeli activist, for Palestine liberation. And there you see that the law, the whole legal system is part of the colonial regime. It's a legal, it's a kind of colonialism that operates with the law, both the military courts, where you have 99% conviction of Palestinians facing trial, and land law are those that are designed to rob people out of it. So what does it mean to be an activist, an anti-colonial activist, and work with the law is a very complicated question. And this is why we need to be tuned to the way we use the term forensics. So in jurisprudence, forensics means today that which pertains to the court, but actually what we wanted to do is to go back to the original meaning of the word in Latin. The original meaning of the word is that which pertains to the forum. And the forum is really the public space. It's a public space of economy and of trade, of exchange of ideas. And for us, the idea of making evidence political is making evidence public. And indeed, sometimes the court is a useful instrument, always with a degree of suspicion. You always have to enter the court with care, with suspicion. Are you actually helping, or are you getting complicit with state institutions and their processes? So making evidence public for us is taking a piece of research, presenting it perhaps first in court, then presenting it in the media, then presenting it perhaps in an exhibition where the public can come and look at it freely and openly, and could actually also learn from the way in which it's always a collaborative research process has kind of ended up in a piece of evidence. And I would say, moreover, that that strategy of where to use the piece of evidence is really depend on the place where you are, where you're working. It's different in Europe, and it's different in Turkey, and it's different in Palestine, it's different in China. Maybe it's even not possible there to use human rights evidence in a legal process. In Turkey, we felt with the Tahir Elçi case that it was important, and indeed we were working on the murder of Tahir Elçi, who is a lawyer, who was a human rights lawyer in the Diyarbakir Bar Association. These are people that believe that you could, through the law, achieve issues of peace and justice, and we had to honor that. But we were not surprised by the verdict that was handed down on this trial. We felt that this is almost preordained, but we're not sorry that we participated in it, because we feel that the very fact there was a trial, the very fact people needed to see the videos, the very fact people are still speaking about Tahir and his work, his legacy, and the work that has been done in Eastern Turkey, is in the Kurdish-speaking area, it's absolutely essential. So sometimes a court is a vehicle for justice. It's not a place that produces it, but it's a vehicle for keeping things in the public domain. So forensics for us is making evidence public. That is what is important. And different aspect of that publicity, the same evidence would operate differently in court, it would operate differently in a public exhibition.
Thank you so much. Actually, you may have touched on this in your previous answers, but I would like to ask again. What theoretical foundation does forensic architecture draw upon? Before delving into the research methodologies, we would like to understand the theoretical foundation that guides these methodologies. Could you elaborate on that now, please?
No, this is fantastic, because it's a fantastic question, because, you know, we not only am I an academic, and forensic architecture sits at Goldsmiths, which is a university. It sits at Goldsmiths, which has been, until recently, where we started facing like really brutal cuts and attacks by the government and by the governance of our own university, has been a kind of a laboratory of critical thinking. Really, so many of ideas about critical ecologies, about critical legal studies, about visual cultures and cultural studies have kind of been incubated here. And this is what this university prides itself on. And forensic architecture really emerged at an interesting kind of moment where the focus of critical thinking shifted from textuality into a kind of a celebration of the material world, a sort of understanding of soil, of buildings, of the environment in a material way, of plants, of ecologies, in one hand. On the other hand, a kind of critical media studies, where the understanding is that, you know, everything is mediated. Almost everything is a photograph. No, you can look at the surface of the earth, and the surface of the earth hold inscriptions of the activities, the combats, the travel that goes on top of it. You can read it as a kind of for its indexiality, for the way in which facts and movements are registered on it. So we came and we emerged at a moment of extremely robust theoretical debate that is happening at Goldsmiths, the shift from textuality to materiality, a shift into a lot of what was learned from deconstruction as a kind of philosophical field moved into critical media studies, where, you know, you were looking at close and detailed readings of not of text, but of pixels and the materiality of media and glitches and all those elements. That was coupled also with another theoretical development that was very distinct here, which was what was called the kind of the post-critical, in which intervention in the world was actually sought from political activists that were not content with simply offering critical insight into situation, but seeking what is critical intervention, how to actually be in the world, how to care for it, how to exist within it as a form of practice that is not abandoning critique, but inhabiting it, embodying it with all its materiality and bodily kind of dimension. So all those shifts, another shift that kind of, and we were at the kind of intersection of another kind of transformation that was interested in cities and architecture. Architecture shifting from a design practice into a critical practice that allow us to illumination on politics and culture. And I feel that FA, forensic architecture, emerge out of those all those theoretical rivers kind of coming together. And we started celebrating our, multivalented way of being, of having artists and of having critical scholars and having architects and having lawyers and critical legal study people. So in our team, we have people like Başak Ertuğ, who is one of the greatest, I think, of contemporary of a new generation of critical legal practitioners and critical legal studies people, all the way to, Susan Shupley, and Lawrence Abu Hamdan, who are, world renowned artists. And of course us, the architects and the scientists that work with us. So it's a place of great intersection. It's kind of like this great, wonderful billiard snooker table where balls are like hitting each other and flying in different directions. Hopefully sometimes we get it into the right hole.
I would like to continue discussing your work on documenting Israel's occupation in Palestine and proving genocide. And on the one hand, Israel designated evacuation roads using complex maps, as you also illustrated in your book. This is supposedly well-intentioned approach while confusing people with these maps, and also laid a scientific groundwork for genocide. In other words, it's using spatial visualization techniques to say that we showed you the way. And this is a good example of how a professional field, when reduced to mere technical knowledge, can be misinterpreted, actually. So it shows that a profession is never just a profession or purely technical. Could you briefly summarize the situation in the region and share examples of your spatial work in the context, please?
Okay, firstly, just I want to thank you for this point, because it's exactly at the heart of an issue. Contemporary genocide that is undertaken by the manipulation of legal strategies, because Israel military operates perhaps with the highest number of all militaries of legal advisors. And they're looking at every act that is proposed and trying to see how to make it legal. Now, you need to produce genocide, which is the most serious of crimes, by combining multiple, acts that profess themselves to be legal, legitimate targets that, so you pin your strikes. You want to destroy a city, but you have to pin every bomb into something that the lawyers could understand as a legitimate target. And here, the conception of the subsoil, of the tunnels as this kind of amplifying its threat, allows Israel to attack everything over the surface. But the abuse of humanitarian principles, a violence that seeks to save, right? That profess itself to save lives, but becomes humanitarian, is the most serious of acts. And indeed, when you look at each one of the evacuation orders separately, what is clear is that the Israeli army is telling people, go away, leave an area where war is going to be fought in, and in this area, save your life. But what happened is, whenever they order an evacuation of a place, they claim that anyone that stays becomes a legitimate target. Anyone that stays is a terrorist for them. So, okay. So firstly, they divided the group of people into terrorists, i.e. legitimate targets, and people who could be saved. Those terrorists could be annihilated. Those people that could be saved, now we need to look at all evacuation order together, but not one by one. And you need to see where are people being pushed. And when we've analyzed the total geography of that movement, we can see very, very clearly that there is a directional pattern in it. From the fertile north to the arid south, from the agricultural areas to the dunes, right? Imagine Gaza is divided in 4 parts with a road in the middle, and Wadi Gaza dividing it into north-south. The southwestern corner is the most arid, and this is where all Palestinians are. And you see how that continues the ideology of settler colonialism. Settler colonialism, and particularly agrarian settler colonialism, which is Zionism has been displacing people from the fertile lands onto the less fertile land. And it's just like agrarian settler colonialism in a country like Guatemala, where the indigenous Maya people are pushed from the fertile valleys and ending up on the hills. And then people think, on the hills, the indigenous like to live on the hill. They don't like to live on the hill. They're just being pushed from the fertile valleys onto them. Palestinians are the same, and they've been pushed and displaced from the very and most fertile areas of Palestine. So in a sense, you need to have a deep understanding of the climate. You need to have a deeper understanding of soil type. You need to have a deep understanding of the way in which the environment and architecture interact in order to, and then you map upon that the evacuation order. So in a sense, when you think about genocide, it's not about each act separately. Each act could be, yes or no, a war crime. When war crimes are added together into a systematic and widespread attack against the population, that could be a crime against humanity. When you have an intent, a declared intent to destroy, as Israeli politicians and military figures have expressed before the war, you have a serious case of genocide. And the idea is to show how all those things work together. It's not about the act, it's about the relation between acts. It's the relation between bombing and displacement, between destroying a hospital and destroying an agricultural field, between not allowing aids and displacing people into an arid area. It is in the relation that you could see. It's a kind of a meta practice. It's a kind of meta research, it's not the incident. It's the sum total of the incident. It's the relation between the incident and speech. And I think that after a decade or so of work, we have gained a lot of experience in understanding precisely those sets of relations as constitutive of an ideology, and in this particular case, of ideology of settler colonialism, adding up to a genocide.
Actually, moving on from here, it seems like in recent years, architecture has been drifting away from its social function. In your book, Hollow Land, you explain how architecture is used as a tool of occupation, control, and oppression, illustrating the transformation of Palestinian land since 1967, and how the occupying Israeli forces try to seize geography through architecture. What you have done under FA framework is the complete opposite. It is one of the most concrete examples of how architecture can also be used as a tool for social struggle. In other words, where there is oppression, opportunities for resistance also emerge. And we experienced a similar example in Turkey after the devastating earthquake in 1923. Independent architects and urban planners came together and initiated an extensive mapping effort, sharing all the information about the destruction and its scale as open source data. This was public information that in the subsequent reconstruction process would strengthen the public's hand against the state, which holds the monopoly on knowledge. I would like to hear your perspective on how architecture can be an effective tool for social critique and action, as your insight will make a valuable contribution to this discussion.
Yeah, Sinem, I think that there is an obvious way to think about architecture as, you know, in a time of emergency, as the necessity to provide shelter. And I don't see it lightly. I think that is, at some moment, that's what it is necessary. It is necessary to protect people, to protect families living with the appropriate building regulation that are enforceable, that people could be living in safety. I think when these do not exist, this is a political problem, or problem of corruption, or problem of neglect, which is also a political issue. I think there's a more profound way to think of an earthquake or any so-called natural disaster is always entangled environmental and urban problem, or environmental human problem. It exists at the intersection between them. If there are no human in a particular area, it could be an earthquake, there could be a flood, and that's the way, you'd like to say, nature speaks to itself. The way you inhabit risk, area in risk, the way you build on it, the way you care for an environment that is undergoing climate chaos or destruction, the way in which you manipulate hydrological cycles by damming, is really the fundamental question of living with the earth, not living on the earth, sharing a space with the earth together as our partner in understanding these sets of relation critically. And I think that when the emergency needs are over and cared for, and people are housed and respected with the appropriate housing, and I wish all the best. And I know quite a few people whose families were in the regions affected, and I've shared the anguish and fear and craving for news and the anxiety when the earthquake happened, of what exactly happened to loved one. When the emergency is dealt with, we need to take it as a fundamental challenge. And it's not really a question that is resolved on a scale of a single building, but a question of fundamentally rethinking our relation of living with the earth.
I would like to ask one more question that I find really important to discuss. The topic is the future of architecture, particularly in countries like Turkey. In these countries, the education of architecture and spatial planning focuses on Western-centric content. While architecture might be seen as cool in Western capitalist countries, where designing in fancy offices, wearing fancy clothes, and making life easier for the top 1% is the norm in exploited, oppressive, and fascist countries, architecture and spatial planning can suddenly become a matter of struggle. And despite this, in underdeveloped colonial countries, architectural education and the profession are often reduced to mere design, with the belief that everything can be solved in an ideal world built on design principles. This also conceals the exploitation of labor by worker architects in this field. From this perspective, what would you say about the function and the future of architecture?
Architecture is not a practice. Architecture is a struggle. It's part of a struggle. It's a tool of struggle. It sometimes could be an instrument of care and sometimes a weapon. And it's a struggle that has recently lost its purpose. I don't know what it is for. When I see the kind of, some of the contemporary architecture and its total surrender to the whims of dictatorial regimes, authoritarian regimes that operating, critical architectural practice emerging out of, the post-68 movement is now turned into service providers for money accrued in a sort of like the perfect capitalist system of dictators. I think that architecture, and if I am to speak to young architectural students, understand your vocation. You're part of a struggle. Whatever your struggle is, struggle for a political struggle, a struggle for liberation, as we have in Palestine, a struggle for justice, and a struggle against authoritarianism, and you may identify with that. How do you define your architectural choices, the way you design space on the level of landscape, on the level of a building, on the level even of a room, with that in mind? Bear it in mind and make every act count towards this purpose.
As a final question, I would like to ask about the feedback you receive from the public. How do you get feedback from the public, specifically from architects, the academic community in architecture, and students? And how you receive public feedback?
Look, we're very niche within the architectural community. I don't know that this makes a dent. I mean, the architectural industry is huge. It's hundreds of billions of dollars in size. We are, a kind of a very, very small counter practice to architecture. What am seeing us being influential in is architectural education. I see architecture students wanting to work with us. I see, what filled my heart with joy is to see how many people want to work with us when we advertise for a job, or when I go to schools everywhere and I see architecture students trying some kind of conversation with our work. That's terrific. So I think in any time when you want to look for change in the future, see what the students are doing, and what the students are doing is in many places, not always, I feel is great, and I want to empower it more. And I hope that in schools of architecture across Turkey, that is more essential than almost most places. So, and I will be in Istanbul in December for a lecture. And
oh, perfect, Mr. Weizmann. Do you have anything to add? And I'm trying to keep it on time, actually, but if you have something on your mind to add about your work, maybe about Turkey or architectural practice.
I want to maybe say one thing.
Yeah.
It's a bit more personal. We have lost a former somebody from Turkey who was working very closely with us. His name is Ali Can, Akturk. And yeah, we're still trying to understand the circumstances of his passing. Ali Can was one of the bravest and most talented people that I have worked with. And the team here is mourning his passing and wishing our warmest condolences to everyone that knew him and loved Ali Can.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to express my deep gratitude, both personally and...
It was lovely talking to you.
It was really nice, and I would really like to thank you on behalf of the team, Ayrım and Alan, for accepting our invitation and taking the time to join us today.
Hugely pleasure.
Yeah, we will continue to closely follow the meaningful work FA does. Personally, I'm already following that what FA does, and I'm hoping that this video and the paper will be published in IREM will help architectural students and maybe other activists to follow you more closely. And I hope that one day institutions like yours, maybe this is going to sound not nice, but I'm hoping that one day institutions like yours will succeed in making themselves absolute, you know?
Absolutely. And then, you know, I'd love to return to our architecture as a design practice.
Exactly. So I would like to also conclude with my best wishes for continued solidarity with you and with your work. And we are sending you so much support.
Thank you so much.
Means a lot, and wonderful talking to you, Sinem. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.